Shalom Aleichem, everybody. We're continuing with our series of virtual Divrei Torah. I'd like to start off by wishing all those in need of refuah shlema should have refuah shlema b'karov, and those in need of a consolation should have a consolation. Thank God things are improving, and this past Shabbos, for the first time in a very long time, we were able to daven inside of our shul, thank God, and we hope things continue to get better and to improve. This week's Parsha, Parshas Behaaloscha, starts off with Hashem commanding Moshe to in turn command Aaron that Behaaloscha saneros amul pnei hamnorah ya'iru shiva saneros, which means tell Aaron, Hashem says to Moshe, Behaaloscha saneros, when you kindle the flame, make sure that the wicks are facing el mul pnei hamnorah, to the middle stem of the candelabra, that the wicks of the three branches on either side of the middle stem should be facing towards the middle. The lesson behind that is that God doesn't need, if you will, the candelabra to give light. Rather, the lights are pointed inwards, indicating that it's not there for practical usage, if you will. But Rashi, of course, takes note of the unusual term for kindling, Behaaloscha, which the Parsha gets its name from, which literally means when you cause the flame to go up. So why does it use such an unusual term? So Rashi says, quoting Chazal, that this teaches us that madlik ad shetehei shalheves ola me'eleh. When Aaron kindles the flame, kindles the wicks of the menorah, he has to light it in such a way that the flame goes up on its own, is lit on its own. Even when he takes away his candle, the wick remains burning independently. It can't just be that he holds his candle near the wick, and it looks like the wick is a flame, but when he takes away his candle, the wick remains unkindled. No, he does not fulfill his obligation that way. Rather, he has to light the wick in such a way that it remains burning bright even when he takes away his influence, his candle. And many darshanim have pointed out that this is really a broader metaphor for kindling the soul of a fellow Jew, of a fellow human being. The verse in Mishlei states, in Proverbs states, Ner Hashem nishmas adam. The candle of God is the soul of man. So a person's soul is really compared to a candle. So the Torah is telling us when you can kindle or you try to light the candle of your fellow Jew, whether it's a student, whether it's a child, a parent-child relationship, or even a peer, right? You have to do it in such a way that even when you take away your influence, they continue to burn brightly on their own. It can't just be that you make an effort and it looks like they're a flame, but they're not really a flame. They're just reflective of your enthusiasm, but when you take away your influence, they're not able to stand independently and burn brightly independently. Then if that's the case, you have not done your job. You have to do it in such a way that even when you remove your candle, when you remove your influence, their soul continues to burn brightly with the flame of Torah and enthusiasm and passion and knowledge, even on their own. And in fact, we just restarted the cycle of Perkei Avos last week, at least in Chutz La'aretz, it was Perek Aleph and Perkei Avos, where we read the first Mishnah, Moshe Kibul Torah Sinai. Moshe received the Torah from God at Sinai. He passed it down to Yoshua, and Yeshua passed it down to the prophets, and the prophets to the elders, and the elders passed it down to the men of the Great Assembly, who were the great rabbis who lived at the beginning, 120 great rabbis and prophets who lived at the beginning of the Second Temple period. As the Mishnah says, Heim Amru Shlosha Dvarim. The men of the Great Assembly were known for saying three things. Number one, Hevu Misunim Badin, be deliberate in judgment. In other words, that's addressed to judges. If you think you've seen this case before, don't be so quick to jump to a decision. Each case has its own nuances, and be deliberate and slow in making a judgment in a court case. And the second one is V'ha'emidu Talmidim Harbe, which literally means cause to stand up many students. And Rabbi Soloveitchik takes note of this very strange language. Actually, just to round out the Mishnah, the third thing is as ba'asu siag la-Torah, make a fence around the Torah, meaning make rabbinic safeguards to protect that people don't even come close to violate actual Torah prohibitions. But focusing on the second teaching of Hamidu Talmidim Harbe, Rabbi Soloveitchik points out why the term Vehemidu, cause to stand up. It's a very unusual term. Just say Lamdu Talmidim Harbe, teach many students or have many students. What does it mean, cause to stand up? Hemidu from Lashon Omeid, to stand, cause to stand up many students. So Rabbi Soloveitchik, along the lines, as we said earlier in terms of Behaaloscha, says a Rebbe's job is not just to give the lesson, impart the information, and if he got it, good, and if he doesn't get it, also good. No, you have to cause them to be able to stand up on their own 2 feet. You have to teach them as a Rebbe, you have to teach your students in a way that they have the skills and the ability and the desire to stand up on their own 2 feet, meaning to function independently. They don't have to run to you for answers every 2 seconds. They could read the text on their own. They can analyze the text on their own. Of course, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be asking you questions. As a Rebbe, hopefully you want your students to be in contact and to constantly learn from you. But what it is saying is you have to teach them in a way that they could act now independently and are so inspired to act and learn independently, such that one day, God willing, they will have their own students and continue the chain of Masorah, of Jewish tradition, passing it down from generation to generation. So again, underscoring the same idea as the Rashi, that when the Kohen Gadol, or the Kohen, doesn't have to be the Kohen Gadol per se, lights the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash, he has to light it in such a way that the wick remains lit even when he takes away his candle, meaning it burns bright independently even when the teacher or the parent's influence is removed. Very important pedagogical, educational lesson for influencing whether a child, a student, or even a peer, that they have to really be inspired. I mean, ultimately, that's the goal, that they be inspired on their own, and not even when you remove your influence, they burn bright. The flame of their soul burns bright on their own, and they're able, in turn, God willing, to influence others. And there's a chain reaction of spreading light, God willing, around the world. Very important lesson. The Torah continues in Parshas Behaaloscha later on. It has actually the famous inverted nuns, the nunin hafuchin. If you look in a Torah scroll, or even in a Chumash, they have it as well. There are 2 verses in later on in the parsha, the 2 verse of Vayibin Sa Aaron and of Nuchu Yomar, which means Vayibin Sa Aaron Vayomer Moshe Kuma Hashem V'yafutzu Ovecha V'yanusu Misanecha Mipanecha. It was when the ark traveled. And Moshe said, "Get up, Hashem, Kuma Hashem v'yafutzu oivecha. May your enemies be scattered. V'yafutzu Kuma Hashem v'yafutzu oivecha v'yanusu misanecha mipanecha. May those that hate you, your enemies, flee from before you." Uvenucho Yomar, and when the ark was set down, he would say, "Shuva Hashem ribivos alpha Yisrael." Return, Hashem, the master of the hosts of the myriads of the Jewish people. So these 2 verses are set off from the verses that come before it and the verses that follow it by, if you look in the Torah scroll, with 2 upside down nuns. And the question is, what's going on over here? What's this unusual section? Why is this section so important that it's set off from the rest of the Chumash? So number one, the Talmud actually points out that this actually is a sefer b'fnei atzmo. These 2 verses actually constitute technically a book in and of itself. In fact, the Talmud learns out that what's the smallest size of a book of scripture that contains sanctity? It's if it contains the amount of letters, and actually 85 letters that are in these 2 verses, that scroll of Kisvei HaKodesh, of written Torah, it will be have sanctity like of the Bible, because the smallest possible book in the Bible is these 2 verses. So it's actually a sefer b'fnei atzmo, a book on its own. What's so important about these 2 verses that they constitute a book on their own? So many others have said, Rabbi Soloveitchik points this out, is that part of what the verses is saying is that the ark travels. In other words, that wherever the Jews traveled, the ark, which contains the Torah, the 2 tablets of the 10 Commandments, and later the Torah scroll that Moshe wrote, right? Wherever the Jews go, the Torah travels with them, which is an essential key concept in the Torah, that the Torah is not bound by any particular geographic location, nor is it bound by any point in history, but rather the Torah is boundless in terms of it applies at any point, any place in the world, and at any point in history, which of course this is a very central teaching of the entire Torah, the eternity and constant relevance of Torah. So that's why these 2 verses are set off and become a book of their own, because of the centrality of the teaching that's contained therein within these 2 verses. Now the question is, but why by upside down nuns? Why is it set off and demarcated in that kind of a fashion? What do these upside down nuns represent? Literally, nunin hafuchin is the term used. So there's a collection of midrashim called Yalkut Ruveni, And we've heard of Yalkut Shimoni. Yalkut literally means a gathering, an anthology, a likut of various midrashim. So the Yalkut Reuveni quotes a lot of unusual midrashim, and it says the following. It says the word nun, which is of course the letter nun, but the word nun in Aramaic actually means fish. So it says nunin hafuchin means upside down fish, meaning referring to basically fish that are swimming upstream against the current of the river. So Rabbi Soloveitchik pointed out what is the meaning of this unusual medrash. It's saying that the Jewish people, and with their Torah, which these verses offset, tend to swim against the stream of general society. General society has its cultural norms and ways of behaving and philosophies, but the Jewish people are nunin hafuchen. They're upside down or inverted nunin, inverted fish. We stream upstream. Everyone else is swimming downstream with the current, and the Jewish people have their own unique path. We don't adopt the values and the teachings and the morals of general society. We go with the Torah, like which we said is timeless and applies at all times in all societies and all cultures, and that's it. That is our guiding light, is the Torah, which is more often than not in contradiction to generally accepted norms in society. Now, it doesn't mean we purposely, of course, act in a bizarre, strange fashion, but what it does mean is that we hold true to our principles, irregardless or regardless of what society says is okay or not okay. We have timeless principles of morality and truth as embodied in God's eternal and timeless Torah, which I think, of course, is a lesson which is timeless and always relevant, but especially in the society that we're living in today. I'm sure everyone's watching the news and kind of seeing the lawlessness and chaos, unfortunately, that's gripped many of our great American cities. And it seems, sometimes in general society that good is bad and bad is good, and anarchy and lawlessness is lauded, where as opposed to, unfortunately, law and order and justice and the rule of law is derided and mocked and scorned. Now, of course, sometimes people in authority could abuse their power, and that's, of course, the Torah speaks out about that as well. But I think it's important that we don't just get swayed by what's trendy or what's a fad or what's currently going on, but we have our head screwed on straight. We have timeless values. We are nunin hafuchen. We're not afraid to swim against the current and really call a spade, and what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong, and not get things reversed as so often happens in society today. So I think it's, again, a very important lesson of the upside down nuns, the fish that swim against the current, that we don't necessarily always just take the popular or politically correct view. We have timeless values. We're not swayed by fashions and fads. We say what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. The Torah, which these offset nuns, upside down nuns, surround, the Vayibin Sa'aron, it travels with us, even in the United States of America, even over 3,300 years after the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. It's still as relevant and fresh and informative, and guides our lives in every detail as it did on the day it was first given at Mount Sinai 3,300 years ago. So again, a very important and timeless lesson. So I'd like to again wish you all a good Shabbos. We hope things continue to improve, that our minyanim get back more and more to their normal schedule and normal capacity, and that blessing, the world hopefully will have blessing and peace and stability, not chaos and anarchy and violence, God forbid. And God willing, things will improve, get better and better on all fronts, both the health front and societally, and may we merit, the ultimate epic and era of historical peace and health and prosperity with the Bias Mashiach Tzidkenu B'mehera B'yameinu Amen. Have a great Shabbos.